Hey guys, how y'all doing today? My name is Franchise Fanatic, and welcome back to the channel. And if you guys, there's another Indiana Jones review. Today we're tackling Indiana Jones 3, or Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Now, before I actually watched this movie, I really thought for the longest time that The Last Crusade meant the last film, because, you know, it was a trilogy. But apparently, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and a few other people kind of wanted this to be a 5-movie arc. And hey, we got a 4th, and we're going to get a 5th. So today is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Now, first of all, which is kind of also interesting, this movie opens up with a little bit of a introduction into Indiana Jones, you know, why he's afraid of snakes, how he got used to using a whip. It's not just character service, it's a really good character arc. That kind of, you know, when you watched Raiders and Indiana Jones is like, Jock, I hate snakes, you know that. And he's like, oh, I have a backbone, you know. But it's funny because you watch it and you're like, why does he hate snakes? He's freaking Indiana Jones. How could he hate snakes? And you actually see how he hates snakes in this film, which is kind of cool. We also get this kind of thing where young Indiana Jones is played by River Phoenix, which is Joaquin Phoenix's brother, which is kind of interesting. Really cool dynamic, and I think that this movie, out of all the 3 that I've rewatched for YouTube so far, I'm going to watch Crystal Skull today when I'm filming this. Basically, this movie is exceptionally well shot, as the other 2. But this one actually plays into the story, you know, like you get the shot of River Phoenix, Indiana Jones, kind of with this, you know, when the bandit gives him his, you know, Indiana Jones trademark hat, and he kind of looks down, and then it swipes or, you know, transitions to the next shot of Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones, and it's in the same position. So there's a lot of great scene transitions in there. They're not just like wipe or cut or crossfade or dissolve or whatever, you know, it's actually like They're filming techniques that actually make sense. So I think the editing in this one is actually really freaking well done. I think it's the best out of the 3 that I've rewatched so far. Now this one, in terms of watchability, is kind of going up and down for me. I think that the acting is still great. The writing is still great. I think the pacing's still good. This one has probably not the most intense moments. I think Temple of Doom is probably the most intense. But this film has the most scenes where I'm on the edge of my seat. You know, there's so many action scenes. There's so many really great moments, like the blimp fight or the tank chase or even the beginning opening scene with River Phoenix as Indiana Jones. You're just seeing you know, the big motorcycle chase, which is kind of, I'm watching it and I'm like, wow, this is like in Tintin, you know? So it's kind of funny that they have these different, because Tintin was also directed by Steven Spielberg, which is kind of funny. Maybe you got inspiration from this film. But there's a lot of great action scenes, and, you know, there's still the oddball with the CGI. You know, this was 1989, so the same year as Tim Burton's Batman 89. And, you know, I think that this film, it's the best looking in terms of the original 3, but the CGI, you can still notice it. You know, there's a few shots, especially where Indiana Jones and Henry, his senior, you know, his dad, they're in like the motorbike and they're just kind of talking after they kill those guys after escaping from the castle, you know, and they're kind of talking about Jesus and the cup and the way to Berlin and Venice and all this, and you can just tell the way like each character has kind of like a white outline over their bodies. It's kind of strange looking. And again, it's in the 80s, what you expect, but you know, you do notice it, and it's not outright horrible. But it is like, oh, you can tell when they're in front of a CGI element or a back paint or a matte painting or, you know, what have you. It's not bad, but, you know, you do notice it when you're like, oh, man, you know, because there's so much of these films, the original 3, are filmed in real locations. So when you go to a CGI backdrop or a matte painting or whatever, it does stand out like a sore thumb. And it's not exactly a sore thumb that's horrible, but it's still a sore thumb, you know. In terms of the comedy, I think that this movie had the best comedy in all of the Indiana Jones movies I've seen so far. And that's in tone to, you know, Henry Jones Sr. I think that Sean Connery did a great job. I think he sadly passed away last year. I don't think because of COVID or any of that pandemic shite, but just natural causes, I think. But basically, he was good in this movie. I think this film gets a little bit slack. They're like, oh, it's too funny, it's too jokey. And I will admit that, you know, comparing Indiana Jones 1 and 2 is like watching Thor 1 and Thor 2, right? And then you watch Thor 3, Ragnarok, and all of a sudden Thor's really jokey, and he's funny, and he's making all these jokes, and everyone's laughing, and it's a good time. But it's completely inconsistent with Thor's character to be that funny. Yeah, people love Ragnarok, I love Ragnarok, but Thor is kind of out of character in that film. He's not supposed to be jokey, stupid, funny, you know. So to all of a sudden have this Indiana Jones film with a little bit of intensity, a lot of action, and then of course a butt ton of humor, it kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's like, you know, why is Sean Connery, you know, why is Henry Sr. going, whoa, 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 with an umbrella, or why is he making like, oh, Junior, we gotta go there, you know, it's like, it's weird, you know what I mean? Indiana Jones does this weird, like, Scottish accent when he's looking at tapestries, and it's just like, okay, I guess he can do an Irish accent, whatever. So some of the humor is a bit too jokey, it's a bit too lighthearted for an Indiana Jones film where people are getting shot and beheaded and punched and kicked and stabbed and shot and, you know, what have you, to just kind of cut away to a really funny scene. And don't get me wrong, the humor is funny. There's a lot of funny moments in this. I love when he freaking shoots the thing off his plane and he's like, they got a son, you know, it's pretty funny. He is a funny character. And seeing all these elements, or, you know, I think when he catches the freaking floor on fire, you know, he goes, and it just makes it worse. I think it's funny, you know. There are certain scenes that are genuinely hilarious. One of my favorites, too, is where I think they're driving in the car, and Henry Jones Sr. is like, well, it couldn't get worse than that, or something like that, and then they drop a effing bomb, just blows up the car and goes into a ditch. You know, so there are funny moments in here, but for every funny moment, you do get a lot of action scenes. You know, the action is still on point, and, you know, it really does. The effects are good. I think that the focus on family, I think this is the one Indiana Jones movie that, out of all four that I remember, maybe they'll change it with the fifth film, but I do think that this film has the most heart put into it, you know what I mean? Like, it's not just Indiana Jones is kind of at a loose ends with his dad, and that's it. You start the movie just from the very first scene where young Indiana Jones, River Phoenix, walks in, he goes, Dad, I got something, and he's like, no, say it in German, or whatever, you know. You can tell he's a very strict and kind of, strict dad, but he does it out of love, you know what I mean? But in doing so, he's kind of neglecting his own son, and that's what kind of screws over and hurts Indiana Jones. So it's not just, you know, Lloyd and Garmadon from the Lego Ninjago movie. It's that, but a little bit more. Of course, both films had the same father and son thing, but both handle it differently in good ways. In unique ways, but I do think this one, you know, you start off going, okay, Indiana Jones isn't too great with his dad, and then the end of the movie, and I almost cried, I didn't cry, but, you know, upon watching it for what it is and kind of realizing for the first time that they have this arc in there, when he calls him Indiana, he's not just calling him Indiana to get his freaking hand away from the chalice, he's calling him Indiana because he realizes and he accepts that he wants to be called Indiana. He wants to, you know, it's like a little kid going, Dad, look at this, Dad, look at this, Dad, look what I made, and he's always like, no, screw you, get away from me, you know, and it's all that pent-up stuff, so he finally, it all comes to a head when he calls him Indiana. It's Henry Jones Sr. realizing the error of his ways and kind of realizing, look, you want to be called that, you want to do this, here you go, you know, I allow it now, you know, and it's a great freaking moment. It's one of the best moments probably in all four films. It's just, it's got the heart, you know what I mean? Raiders and Temple don't really have much of that. This one, they try to do something different, and I like it. Again, my only issue, CGI is still a little bit weird. I think the one shot where the guy drives off a tank, and you see it's like that one shot of him kind of coming toward the camera. Like, imagine this hole is like the guy's mouth, and it goes like that toward the camera. It looks fake as heck, you know. It looks cheesy as hell. But what are you gonna do? You know, it's made in '89. It's not horrible. But again, you do tell with the CGI and the matte paintings, you can tell when someone's not in front of a real-world element because, again, there's so many real-world elements in there. But the action is still on point. I think the comedy's good. A little bit too much comedy. I think that they try to go a little bit too slapstick in there. It still has the comedic and charming tone that the first two films had, but it seems like they kind of Thor Ragnaroked it before Thor Ragnarok came out, and they just kind of doubled down on the humor and the quirkiness. And it's not bad. It's not cheesy. But I don't know, you know what I mean? It's a bit of a tight thing for me. It's a love-hate thing. But overall, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is a good film. Before they were going to do Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and the Indiana Jones 5 film coming out, I believe, next year, this is a fitting conclusion. And it isn't the end, because we know that. And again, The Last Crusade does not mean the last movie. You could take it that way, but really The Last Crusade, they mention it, the first Crusade, so Indiana Jones, Brody, Sala, all these guys are going toward the metaphorical last Crusade. You know, they're ending the big hunt and fight for the chalice of the cup of Jesus Christ. So there's a lot of great stuff in here. Again, it's not perfect. I do think so far Raiders is the best in terms of how it's made, but this is probably the most entertaining. It's I'm laughing a lot. There's a lot of great action, a lot of good heart, intense moments, a lot of edge-of-your-seat action, and it's got a good mix of everything in there. So again, I'm going to give Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade probably an A-, just like Temple of Doom. So we have one more, guys, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and then man, I don't know. It's going to be a rough one. Not to watch, but to review, because I know a lot of people hate it. I, in fact, really enjoyed Kingdom last time I saw it, so tune in for that review. Again, Last Crusade, A-. I really enjoyed it. It's not my favorite, but it is good. There's a few flaws, but I do think that for what they have, So that's 2 women now named Elsa that are hot. Thanks a lot. But there's a lot. They're both owned by Disney. But I do think that this is a great film. And if again, tell me in the comments what you think about Last Crusade. And again, upon really realizing that The Last Crusade didn't mean the last film, or the, you know, I knew there was a father-son thing in there when I was a little younger. But, you know, now that I'm, I don't know, 22. I mean, I know how old I am, but you know, when I saw this, I don't know how old I was, like 8 or 9. I shouldn't have been watching it because it's really violent. It's not for kids. My dad, again, he was like, put it on, watch it. You know, you'll love it. And, you know, I remember certain things. I remember that like, I don't want to say Muslim, whatever he is, the dude with the red hat, he's dying. I remember the blood on him. I remember the guy, Donovan, turning all old. You know, so there's a lot of iconic moments in there, but upon watching it now, not only critically, but looking for the father-son relationship, there's a lot of good stuff in there. So again, tell me what you think about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. We got one more film, The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Thank you guys, and we'll see you in the next video.